There I am. Good morning. Coffee Conversations with Greg J is on. I was missing with my mouse. Miss. I hope your day is going good. Coffee Conversations is that place where we have culturally relevant conversations about a variety of topics from a decidedly global perspective. We just want to inform and inspire our community, our people, about things that affect us. We talk to people from all over the world, all different perspectives, but centered on our cultural perspective. And today, man, we're in such a um, almost a tizzy as we've entered into 2025. So many things going on. So funny. I had some things planned that I wanted to, how I wanted to emerge into 2025 through our platforms, Beach City Radio, Beach City Perspective. To say Coffee Conversations with Greg J had a lot of messaging I wanted to share, but we've been hit with so much tragedy and so many intensely um, unimaginable events across our nation, starting with the domestic terrorism attacks in New Orleans, then again over in Las Vegas, and then a few days later, fires all over LA County. We're thankful that we were able to speak to a few of our friends on Coffee Conversations with Greg J. You heard recently Pastor G. Lakeith Kennebrew, who's boots on the ground out there in Altadena, and was able to share some insight and perspective on what's going on with the fire. Um, it's King Week, and we actually postponed our planned art exhibit in commemoration of Dr. King because we wanted to turn our attention to relief efforts in specifically Altadena. We just felt like instead of a celebration or a party, if you will, we would serve the legacy of Dr. King better if we concentrated on service to the community, being hands-on out there as we have been doing for quite a few years in various circumstances and situations around our community. In that same vein, we are watchful as a new government is about to step in. We are operating in a level of uncertainty. We're hearing a lot of rhetoric, angry rhetoric, if you ask me, coming from the nation's capital. We don't know what is going to happen. I've been watching this week as they try to, confirm various appointments that President-elect Trump has made. And I mean, man, it's intense. It's almost scary. I say almost scary because we don't want to walk in fear. But one of the categories in this whole vein of uncertainty of what's going to happen is we keep hearing a lot about immigration, mass deportations. You remember early during the campaign, Trump was talking about, the Haitian community in Springfield, Ohio, eating dogs and whatnot. And we ended up having some Haitian activists on to, share what the community, the Haitian community in that region was really all about, how they were mobilizing and advocating for themselves, and I just think that sometimes as, Black Americans, when we hear the topic of immigration, we don't really think about immigration and biases and prejudices that Black immigrants are faced with. People coming over, from the motherland, from Africa, coming here, going to school, becoming citizens and productive citizens and contributing to society in a very great way. What are our brothers and sisters who have come through the immigration system? What are they dealing with? What does mass deportation mean? And the reason that I wanted to focus on it, because I think we tend to fall into the trap of cliches. When they say immigration, we always think about those who may be coming from Mexico and Central America. But we have to widen our lens and really, really look at what does this mean for our brothers and sisters in our community who have immigrated here. They're coming from, any nation in Africa. They're coming from Belize. They're coming from, the Caribbean, all over the diaspora. What are the challenges of immigration for our brothers and sisters? So as I contemplated that question, again, here I go into my Rolodex. Got to get to the experts. Here's my good friend. She is the publisher of Immigrant Magazine, and she is a podcaster, a YouTuber, and just an all-around good person, originally from Cameroon. This is my sister right here, Pamela Anchang. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Greg. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Yes, yes, yes. It's so good to see you. And, with all the things that are going on, and you and Charles and everybody, y'all safe?
Oh, yeah, we are. I really want to start by really just putting, expressing support for the victims of the fire that's going on here in California, Southern California. I wouldn't want to start without addressing that because it is devastating. I know people that have lost homes. I know someone that's lost
Well, let's
someone.
get right into it there, Pamela.
Yeah.
I mean, you are an expert and you've been advocating for immigrant rights for as long as I have known you. I mean, that's your your ministry, if you will, is what I'm trying to say. And you darn good at it, is what I see. When you hear all of this angry rhetoric in the main about mass deportation, immigration, illegal, all this stuff that's happening, what are your initial thoughts?
First of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for giving, Black voices and Black immigrants a voice, because that's what you're doing. I really appreciate it. So, like you said in your introduction, a lot of our community, our Black community, is sometimes very unaware of the challenges that Black immigrants face, and it's really, really heart wrenching because like you said, most of the narrative is on the Mexicans and people from Central America as well, and we forget about our Black immigrants. And however, the consequences of every action, every political decision that's made affects Black immigrants, I think, twice as much because oftentimes we have no representation, we have no voice, and we have to deal with even a lot more beyond just beyond the color of our skin, which, racism is at the top of it all. But it is deeper than that because when they tell stories of other immigrant communities and ignore the Black immigrant experience, they are really taking away, our stories. They are actually taking away our accomplishments. They are taking away our contributions. You don't get to come to United States by coming across the border. When you come from Cameroon or Nigeria or even Belize, you have to fly. Or, Jamaica, all these places, you have to get a visa. So all of these narratives affect us in those ways. So when the narrative about us, or when we talk about deportation, it's going to affect a lot of families. There are lots of Black immigrant families that are here who are undocumented and who, in spite of being undocumented, contribute. And by the way, most of them did not come, illegally, because most Black immigrants typically have a visa that, brings them here. And then maybe they file for asylum or they come as refugees. And sometimes the system doesn't, accommodate whatever their circumstances may be. So you could come in here as an asylee because you're fleeing persecution from your country. And depending, sometimes lack of knowledge may affect you through the system. So for instance, you come to the United States, you're seeking asylum, and you're not aware of the procedure. And so you maybe overstay your visa. Then you're out of status. And that out of status does not define the fact, does not include the fact that you were fleeing persecution, political persecution, or horrible conditions from your country. And so now you're out of status. So you were not illegal. You came legally, but now you're facing this situation. And so I've come across lots of, in fact, I met a young lady the other day and she said, Pamela, I am on deportation. I said, why? And she's from Cameroon. She said, I filed for asylum. And unfortunately, I don't know what happened with her paperwork, but it got lost somewhere in the shuffle. And now she's on deportation. She works, she pays taxes, and she has a daughter. She's a single mother. Now I'm concerned about her because now with the new administration coming in, we're hearing that deportation is not just going to be deporting people that are out of status. It's also going to be because last time there was too much pushback about, leaving children stranded with our parents. There seems to be a push for deporting the entire family. So now, is her daughter at risk? And even if her daughter stays, who is the daughter going to stay with? So it's really heartbreaking because deportation is really sending a frenzy in the Black immigrant community and all immigrant communities, but Black immigrant communities in particular, because first of all, geographically, we're so far away. So now it's not like being next door in Mexico. Maybe you could, I don't know. But if you're deported back to Africa or back to wherever else you're from, Brazil, if you're a Black immigrant from there, it's a long way. It's a long way. So it is frustrating. It is scary. We are scared. I'm scared because most of us have relatives and friends who may be in that category.
See, this is information that we don't really get in the Black American community. We hear the headlines that's in the mainstream, but we don't see like what you're describing. It's like, okay, we don't think about that because we're not really getting that perspective, and this is very real, very, very real. Now, let me ask you this. There might be some people that may say that a lot of immigrants, I saw what's the guy's name, Roland Martin, in particular, I'll just mention his name. He was calling out African immigrants because they were voting for Trump, and so he felt like they were in the majority, and so here we are, Trump wins, and now we're talking about mass deportation, a policy that are going to affect the African immigrant community greatly. What would you say? Is it true that, okay, most of our African immigrants, does the data show that most of our African immigrant brothers and sisters voted the Republican slate and thereby voted for a harsh immigration policy?
I'm so glad you asked that question. Again, that is the misrepresentation of facts. That is the demonization of our people, which is so false. You have to remember that we are not a monolith. We are not a one trained community, right? We African immigrants come from different walks of life and different values. So you can't just say most African immigrants voted for Trump. There are African Americans that voted for Trump. Of course, there are Latinos that voted for Trump. Of course, there are some African immigrants that voted for Trump. I've actually met some of those, right? But it doesn't mean the majority of African immigrants voted for Trump. And so we cannot control what people are going to do. But I do know this. When Vice President Kamala Harris was running, when she was the candidate, African immigrants mobilized. We had African women for Kamala Harris. We had African men for Kamala Harris. We had Africans for Kamala Harris. We raised money for Kamala Harris. And I was a part of, in fact, I was in almost every single one of those groups. And we were so heartbroken when she lost. So because maybe 1 or 2 or 3, whatever percentage voted for Trump, doesn't mean that African immigrants supported Trump. I also know African immigrants who typically vote Republican that switched and voted for Kamala Harris. If not for the historic nature of her her candidacy, at least they voted because we felt like this is our sister. She's of immigrant descent, number one. Let's remember that. She's of immigrant descent. We forget that.
Yeah.
Her dad was a Jamaican immigrant. Her mom was Indian immigrant. So she claims black, but she should claim all of her identity, by the way, because I won't want my child to just pick one side or the other. But she claims black, and we honor that. And we mobilize ourselves for the first time in the history of the electoral process in America. African immigrants whom have been frustrated for the longest time, saying, you sit behind and others fight for us. No, this time around, African immigrants were at the forefront. They engaged. We were having Zoom meetings. I was in so many Zoom meetings. I was so sure that we'd win because for the first time, my black community was on board. We had Caribbeans as well who mobilized. Everybody was mobilized for our sister Kamala Harris. So and it's so disappointing that someone like Roland Martin, who I respect enormously, I would have thought that he would be the one person that would speak up for us, or at least give us a chance, and not just throw such aspersions about a whole big swath of people. When I know that's discouraging, because when you do that, next time around, folks are going to say, it didn't count for anything what we did last time. It's going to make it hard for people like me that are in the trenches, that regardless of whatever is going on, we say we have to keep pushing. For the first time, we educated our community and said, you cannot sit back. And before we couldn't even do it, they were already mobilized. I kid you not. Black women, for African women, not even black, African women, because we actually had our own code. We actually had our own link where Africans, if you go and look at the data, shows that we overwhelmingly, when you see the numbers that show Black women were the majority that voted for Kamala Harris, trust me, there's African women in that list, and there are Caribbean women in that list. It's not just African Americans. But unfortunately, the data is not going to break it down and say people from Cameroon voted this way and so on and so forth. If you look at the percentage of Black men that voted for Kamala Harris, I'm sure there's a percentage of that is African or Caribbean. But also the majority, however, that voted for Kamala Harris, Black, it just says Black, and that's the problem. We get lost in the shuffle because we all just get put in Black. It doesn't say Africans this, African Americans this, and so on and so forth, or Caribbean Americans this. It just puts us all as Black. In that category of Black women, I felt honored. I said, we did it. I didn't say my African American women did it. I said, we the women carried this. We Black women, including me and my African sisters who I know mobilized. So, Roland Martin, I am so disappointed. Brother, please, you need to correct that, because people look up to people like you for enlightenment, because everybody now is getting information from social media. And I keep telling you, what's the source? Now, if I say what's the source and they say the source is Roland Martin, how do I expect people not to believe it? I'm leaving about it.
Yeah. Pamela, it's very interesting because now I think we are faced with such uncertainty, but we've been here before, right? With in terms of Black community versus the government. But now we have more diaspora in the United States, and we have a wide range of topics that we need to take, pay attention to as a community of Black folks in America. We have to think, my personal opinion is we have to think global. That's why we're about building bridges of music, arts, and culture between Africa and African America. I mean, that's why that mission exists, because I just think we need to look at the totality of our Blackness and where we come from all points of the world. And we're living here in this place called America. And because of our melanated skin, we are all encountering racism, systemic racism, biases. Everywhere we go, biases take place. Now, and now as we're moving into this new space, for me, the quote that I have that's been resonating in my mind actually comes from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, where he says, "Do for self." I mean, that I remember reading that, and I was like, wow, this is really a profound statement that I think we need to reverberate in our community. Now, under the heading of do for self, what do we need to do to, what would you say, educate our immigrant brothers and sisters to make sure that their paperwork, is in order? Are there service centers or access, in the communities in which our African Caribbean, the diaspora lives? You know what I'm saying? If I'm in Inglewood, as an example, and I know there's a ton of Nigerians in there, a ton of Belizeans in there, is there a service center or something easy that they can easily access to make sure their paperwork is in order, or if they need help? You know what I'm saying? You see that in other communities.
Yeah.
Do we see that in our diasporic community?
And that's a challenge, but fortunately we do have some resources. I think what the problem is that our community is not educated about the availability of resources. So yes, we do have, for example, we have Baji, Black Alliance for Just Immigration. They are a real big advocacy organization that's big on activism, and they really educate the community about resources, and not just here in California. They are also in New York and other places. So yes, we do have that. And then we have the smaller groups. African Coalition, for example, even has an attorney on board who would give resources, and that one's based here in Los Angeles. And beyond those, actually, there are organizations like Chila. Chila started off as focused on a Latino community, but they have since expanded to include all immigrants. And interestingly, I don't know, in the nonprofit what they call him, well, the executive director who manages it is actually an Ethiopian immigrant. So our brother is an Ethiopian immigrant, and he has always charged me with letting the community know that Chila, which is Community for the Humane Treatment of Immigrant, Chila, yeah, Community for Humane Immigration Reform. Well, in LA, but the LA thing is really not strong. It's really now become national. So between Chirla and Baji, African Coalition, those are already three where people can go. And then, of course, your immigration attorneys. There are lots of immigration attorneys. It behooves us to contact an immigration attorney for information. And if all else fails, call Immigrant Magazine or send me an email. I will connect. Publisher at immigrantmagazine.com. Go to our website, www.immigrantmagazine.com. I work with a lot of immigration attorneys. Some of them have actually been part of my editorial team that have written articles. And so we will do all our best. I mean, now more than ever, we need to all have all hands on deck. And just what you're doing right now, it's amazing because we're putting information out there. So yes, other communities, they're more involved. Unfortunately, our Black immigrant community, when we come here, people are just so focused on, succeeding and making money. So, and a lot of people do not think about, those that are left behind, because everyone is in this rat race and, trying to make it happen. But yes, we do have. Baji is good. Sheila is good. African Coalition is good. And there are a lot more. On our website, we actually do have a list. If you go under immigration, we do have a list of organizations that people can turn to. Yeah.
All right, that's good to know. We'll grab that and put that in the chat, and then we'll also cross-post it on our website, Beach City Radio, beachcityradio.com. Wow, that's very interesting. Now, Pamela, I wanted to ask you, I mean, you've participated in a couple of our advocacies where we wanted to dispel myths about Africa, and one thing about it, I'll just share this with you, then I'll ask the question. Like, okay, for me, I started going to South Africa around 2010, right? And I was going to the Cape Town Jazz Festival, and that was my entree into Africa. But while I was preparing for my very first trip, I was working at the radio station. So I'm on the internet and I'm listening to, of course, radio stations over in Africa. And I'm like really getting enthused over the music that I was discovering. And I was wondering why, audiences weren't hearing the rhythms from Africa over here. And, I just had a whole lot of stuff. In a lot of music industry circles, if you're in my generation, at least, I am widely known as one of the first to really recognize contemporary African music scene, And as I've become that, and as I've made so many friends and been a part of so many cultural exchange initiatives with Mother Africa, it hurts my heart to realize that there is a cultural divide between African Americans and, I say, continental Africans. And I don't I don't have the one snap answer on how to mend that. I will say that I am on a mission to bring that together, because bring us together, because I do believe at the bottom of our heart it really is about education. It's really about having an awareness. What are your thoughts, right, of how we can bridge this gap? How do we bring the African American closer together with the continental African who is living here in America? Because we are more alike than different.
Oh my gosh, the age-old debate. Again, it goes down to history, divide and conquer. Um, if you look at the history of our relationship with each other, all the way from the continent to here, is the misinformation, is the media narrative that has pitted us against each other. Um, so I would say this. My experience has been that when you come from a culture that says your brother is your enemy, or that your brother is a less than, and that's been told you over and over and over again. I used to be a teacher. I'm a teacher by profession, ironically, right? I used to be a teacher, and I taught
I
middle
didn't
school.
know that.
Yeah, I know that's something. I taught middle school. I'm trained as a teacher. My postgraduate education is in education, teaching. So when I came to the United States, I was a teacher. I taught in middle school in Maryland. I taught in Prince George's County middle schools, which was predominantly black young folks, black kids. And I would say this: the opportunities that I was given. I remember the principals that interviewed me for position as a teacher. I was a foreign language teacher. I taught French. Were black, were African Americans, and they embraced me. However, in that embrace, when I was teaching the kids, I realized that the kids had been fed false narratives about Africa. And it broke my heart. That's just to give you a snippet where it starts. It broke my heart. My students would ask me, at that time I wasn't remarried, so my maiden name, they'll call me. Let's just pretend. It was like, Miss so and so, in Africa, do you guys sleep on trees? Do you guys, and there'll be such, stigmatized conversation, things that they had been told about Africa that were not so flattering. That made me wonder where they got information from, and these were kids. So it starts from there. What have we taught the children at home about Africa? These are black children who think that in Africa we sleep on trees, we don't wear clothes. Where did I learn to speak English? Or things that you've been to Africa. That's not true. Some Africans are even more affluent than some folks out here, right? And so why don't we ask these questions about Europeans who are immigrant here? Why, if a European is here, we are not asking them if things are less than kosher where they're from? So if I'm from Africa, it must be because we sleep on trees, we don't have this. Yes, we are challenged in many ways. But when you stigmatize an entire continent, when some people don't even know Africa is a continent, they think Africa is a country. They're not able
Right.
to distinguish that the experiences of maybe someone from Cameroon may not be the same experience as someone from Rwanda. And if you look at Rwanda is competing with the first world right now. If you look at, there's so many countries in Africa that you would think that you were in the first world, right? And so it's all of those things that have shaped this horrible narrative. Some people don't want to be associated with failure. Some people don't want to be associated. Whereas in my culture, we say home is home. Doesn't matter if your home is big, your home is small, your home is poor, home is home. So what is it that is holding us back? So now I'm in the United States, and my experience has been that I've had brothers like you that have embraced me, that are curious about who I am. I've had very positive experiences with a lot of African Americans, but I also know that I have my own community that don't feel that they will be embraced. Again, coming from the fact that we've been, or both sides have been fed this narrative that we are competing with each other. There's people saying we're taking jobs, for example. So if we're taking, what jobs are we taking? What jobs are immigrants taking away? Now you come now to Black immigrants. Some African Americans feel that African immigrants are taking positions that should be theirs. As opposed to us working together, we're tearing each other down. So I think it starts with us. For example, me being on this platform, surely your audience is predominantly African American. Maybe when they get to see the face of an African immigrant and hear an African immigrant speak, then it begins to bring them home, because you and I, when we're out there meeting and places and doing things, not everybody has this opportunity that you and I have. Some people's immediate entourage is predominantly just their family, and they've never had to cross over, and that goes both ways. There are lots of African immigrants that are doing the 9 to 5 job and don't ever have the opportunity to go out there and mingle, unlike you and I, who go out there and mingle. But I have to tell you that I am more than positive and I am more than optimistic that we are getting there, because I have hardly met an African American who was not happy to see me and be inquisitive. And so most times when I go out, I like to wear my African dress, because I feel like that's when I'm showing up. That's when I'm letting people know Africa is in the house. I was just at an event on Sunday for an awards event by Reverend Smart, okay, and honoring, different people that have contributed to the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King's heritage. And I show up always in my African dress, because I want my brothers and sisters who are African American to know that Africa is in the house. We are showing up. And oftentimes they always come up to me and say, "Where are you from?" And it sparks a conversation. So we need to do more of stuff like that. We need to embrace each other. And it's a shame that some people are focused on tearing us down, and some people are so elitist that they don't realize that they're harming themselves by not engaging with their own brothers and sisters that look like them, whether it's from the Caribbean, whether it's from here. I went to Belize a few years ago. My auntie, who invited me there, Ambassador Shabazz, I'm sure you know Ambassador Shabazz. Now, she's in Belize as an ambassador there. And she is organizing all these trips for folks to come to Belize and discover Belize. And Charles and I went there to spend time with her. And we were amazed at how much it felt like home. It felt like being home away from home, like I was at home. I felt like I was in Cameroon, in Belize. I saw my people. Wow. I saw my Garifuna people. I went to the ruins. We went all these places. We had these amazing experiences. You should maybe take one of those trips and go there and be with Ambassador Shabazz. It was just an illuminating experience to go now and see my Caribbean brothers and sisters in their own territory and tell us the stories about how they managed to, some of them, that the Garifunas, how they escaped being enslaved, and just going into those villages and seeing how, like, I should go and tell my people, my gosh, I found our brothers and sisters. It was so good. What an experience. So we should do more of such things, not just go to Hawaii, go to Europe. Let's go and meet our own people. Let's go where our people live and get to discover them and get to know them, and then inform ourselves and make our own decisions about who we are as a people, as opposed to someone else telling us the story of who we are.
Yeah. As one who organizes trips to Africa, we'll let you know it's difficult, to talk our people into going to Africa. They want to put Europe and, China and all these different places ahead of going to Africa. Why? Because they have a stigma in their mind of what their African experience is.
Because they think they'll stay on trees.
Yes. And so, it's interesting that the number one question or statement that people have on our trips, when we say, we give them an ascertainment form at the end, they're like, "Brother Greg, they don't show us this Africa in America." You know what I mean? They are so surprised at the cities and the metropolitan and the nightlife and the people that they see. They are so surprised. And, I was doing a cultural exchange with my brother, Dr. Goba. He's in KwaZulu Natal in South Africa, Zulu. And, he lives in this community in Durban, South Africa, where when I tell you these homes in this section of Durban are bad, okay? And I have some pictures and videos that I have posted when I was just driving down the street there. It's like, well, look at these. And people are like, Greg, that's in Africa. It's like, yes,
See what
that's
I'm telling
someone's
you?
home,
But
right?
you won't see that
They,
on the news, right?
yeah,
The news
yeah,
is always about the destruction and the suffering and the sickness, as if we didn't have that here. There are
yeah.
parts of the United States that if we put that on the news every day, and nobody want to come to the United States.
Yeah, yeah. Now let me ask you this: as a person who is, Cameroonian, and you see, okay, one thing about media is they give us the wrong images of Mother Africa.
Mhm.
Right now, in the political space, we do see an upheaval of governments throwing off the fetters of colonialism and everything. However, when we watch the news here, it's positioned to us as like, okay, there's these rebels and these bad people, and the military is taking over the government. It's a bad thing. When in fact, it's the French colonies throwing off the shackles of colonialism. And I remember someone telling me, an academic, I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Dr. Samad, but anyway, it was, on one of the shows was talking about this is a couple of years back, was talking about if the former French colonies threw out the French military from their nations and withdrew their funds out of the French financial system, we would see a collapse of French government. And isn't that what happened just a couple of months ago? It is absolutely true that the French nation depends on their holding hostage the economics of its former colonies and everything. And I think that what we see is a movement of the people where these nations are saying, okay, France, we don't want you involved in our affairs anymore. As a Cameroonian, and you look back in the news, do you see these things, and are you able to like really crystallize like what's really going on in Africa? And is it a good thing? And what is the future for these nations after they have just like divorced themselves from French rule?
Oh my gosh. Now, I'll say this. I'm not a political scientist, but as an African, I'll speak as
Ah,
an African. Where do we begin? Especially with Cameroon. Listen, there's a wind of change that's blowing across Africa, especially French Africa. We embrace it. When your country has been taken hostage by colonialists in the vestige of neo-colonialism, by all means possible, we will get rid of so-called systems in place that are supposed to serve, but serve only one interest alone, which is the colonial master. When you look at the African Union, it still bows to the colonial master. So then when the people are frustrated and realize that they have no recourse because the people that make up these organizations that are supposed to protect the interests of the people, that these leaders are stooges that have been put there by colonial masters, especially France. So then the people make the decision to do what they have to do. And that's what is happening. If you look at Burkina Faso, as you were talking about some countries that have done what they've got to do, look at what is happening in Burkina Faso. Have you seen where the people have embraced who are they supposed to be a rebellion, a coup d'etat, whatever you can call it, right? People have embraced it and see what that young Traore is doing. I'm sure you're following. You are probably following this even maybe more than I am. But we are watching and observing. We have Burkina Faso. We have other countries next. We even have Senegal that had a good transition with young leadership. We're having countries, African countries, that are saying, we don't want the vestiges of French colonial anything, rule, distant rule, colonialism. We don't want that anymore. Now, the older countries like Cameroon that have older elderly leaders, like our president has been there for maybe almost 50 years now. I mean, all my life I've known two presidents, one that is of late who wasn't even buried in the country, and one that is there, has been there since I was in maybe middle school, or not even middle school, maybe elementary school. He's been there. And now if we decide, and if the people decide to throw him out, then the West will say there's been a rebellion. Yes, we have rebelled against being shackled. Okay, our enslaved brothers had to rebel in order to get their freedom. And so Africans are rebelling to get their freedom from France.
Mm-hmm.
So Africans right now, the average African is just trying to find a way to get rid of all of this. We've been made to believe that we cannot survive without France, we can't survive without the United States, we can't survive without. Now we have to become interdependent. We have to depend on each other. And I'm very proud of all the changes that are taking place. So this is not one of those situations where I'm going to say, oh no, this shouldn't have happened. No. We have embraced it. We want more, as a matter of fact. We want more because it's ridiculous. France depends on African countries for its wealth. France has built its infrastructure on the backs of Africans' minerals, Africa's agriculture, Africa. I mean, you buy bananas in France, they're from Cameroon. Okay, they drink coffee. Where's coffee? Do they grow coffee? Do they grow any of these tropical goods? So it is time that Africans stand up and say no to French. Some people even complain and say, well, the British, they left us and abandoned us. They don't have nothing to do with us. We are dealing with France. If you notice, most countries that were colonized or mandates of Britain and France, you look at those that were mandates given to Britain, because they didn't really colonize us per se. It must have been after the First World War, and we were given as mandates to Britain and France. Now, if you look at that history, the British, when they left and we gained independence, they literally abandoned us. And most African countries that are mandated under the French supervision, can you imagine we're being supervised, are the countries that are suffering the most. They get to decide who our leaders are. They get to decide what we do. Even at the African Union, you would think the African Union would be an independent organized body, but it is not. They often have to check, what does the United States say? What does France say? And France is pegged to the United States. So even if the United States were to say something, they still have to check with France, because all these countries are under the mandate of France. And it's just ridiculous. Again, I'm not a political scientist, but as an African, please, by all means possible, by all means necessary, we would get rid of French rule in Africa, because they are ruling us. All those people that are sitting there, they are not presidents. They are not leaders. They are just managing French interest. Mm-hmm. And they need to go.
You know, we reflect on it's Dr. Martin Luther King weekend, and you know, we remember back in the day, they used to talk about it's nation time. We're about building a nation here in America. And I think it's nation time globally, basically what you're saying right now. And I think it's a great opportunity for us as a powerful economic segment, Black folks in America, right, to build bridges of business and commerce with Mother Africa. Well, you know, this is now the time. You know, that's why we're committed to being in the coffee business, and we're bringing in the coffee from Cameroon. Hopefully soon we'll be bringing from Kenya and all this here. You know, you would be amazed in the coffee market, the premium coffees that are coming from various nations on the continent of Africa, and we can help generate, you know, the funnel of commerce in Black America with our brothers and sisters on the continent, you know. Well, everybody, listen, we're having technical difficulties with our internet. We don't know why everything is happening in the way that it's happening, but it is. And so we're just going to take this opportunity to remind you that Coffee Conversations with Greg J can be heard on our Facebook page, Coffee Conversations with Greg J, our personal Facebook page, all of our different platforms, Beach City Radio, Beach City Perspective. You can go online to our website, beachcityradio.com, beachcityradio.com. We repurpose the audio and we publish that all across wherever you can get your favorite podcast, iHeart, Spreaker, Apple, just wherever. Just type in Coffee Conversations with Greg J. You can see this episode there, or listen to this episode as a podcast and see all of our past episodes, and also sign up and subscribe so that you can be notified when we go live, be notified when we have new episodes. We're always uplift culture through culturally relevant conversations from a decidedly global perspective. We're going to punch in the Immigrant Magazine's website into our chat and on our website so that you can see where to get a hold of Pamela Anchang. What a fantastic conversation. We're going to have her back again, you know, and